Good morning. Today we're going to be talking about sexual and gender development. First of all, let's define the two big components, sex and gender. Sex refers to one's physical, biological classification as female or male. So if somebody has the chromosomes of X and X, their biological classification would be considered as a woman. And if they have an X and Y, their biological classification will be considered as a man. Gender is the psychological and social characteristics associated with being male or female, and those usually defined especially by one's gender identity and learned gender roles. One's sexual orientation is one's degree of emotional and erotic attraction to members of the same sex, opposite sex, or both sexes. Usually we hear, about individuals who are heterosexuals. They're attracted to the opposite sex. Homosexuals, individuals attracted to the same sex. Bisexuals, individuals attracted both to the same sex and opposite sex. And asexuals, individuals who are not attracted sexually to any gender. The sexual orientation, it's mainly genetic and hormonal, although social, cultural, and psychological influences also are involved. I would like you to stop right now and check out the YouTube video titled "When Did You Know?" when a person asks random people in the streets when did they know about their sexual orientation. I personally really like this YouTube clip because it is very interesting to see that once the by passengers asked, when did you know that you were heterosexual, for example, they kind of were like, well, I kind of always knew. And it's very interesting how it puts the question of whether people choose to be homosexuals or bisexuals into a little bit of a very interesting and accurate perspective. Element of sexual orientation is that a lot of people think that it's like, all right, so yes, I'm 100% heterosexual, or I'm 100% homosexual, or I'm attracted equally, like literally 50-50 to men and 50-50 to women. But that's not really accurate. A researcher by the name of Kinsley, he suggested that it's actually a spectrum. And a person can identify themselves, once again, in our society, usually, when asked, it's, well, you shouldn't ask people, but if you do and you have a conversation, they usually identify them on the ends of the spectrum. But research find that a lot of individuals score in between those elements. And the big element of it as well is, well, okay, let's look at rating number 1. Predominantly heterosexual, only incidentally homosexual. What do you mean by that? That sometimes you have fantasies that are of homosexual nature? Do you have dreams? Do you have feelings, so like emotional feelings? Do you actually, occasionally engaged in physical activity? So those definitions of what actually constitute towards your sexual orientation are still up for a debate. And one of the questions for this upcoming discussion post, I ask you to identify people's sexual orientation based on the short description that is provided about them. And that question is required for everyone, but you can choose from the other ones. And I think it will be very interesting to see the potential discrepancies. And that could be a really good point to comment on your peers' initial comments. So I would like to present to you some of the type of questions that non-heterosexual individuals are often asked. But I rewrote it to have it directed towards heterosexuals, and just wanted you to see how potentially that sounds. What do you think caused your heterosexuality? When and how did you first decide you were heterosexual? Is it possible that your heterosexuality is just a phase you may grow out of? Is it possible that your heterosexuality stems from a fear of others of the same sex? If you have ever slept with a member of your own sex, is it possible that you might be gay if you tried it? If heterosexuality is normal, why are so many mental patients heterosexual? Why do you heterosexual people try to seduce others into your lifestyle? Why do you flaunt your heterosexuality? Can't you just be who you are and keep it quiet? The great majority of child molesters are heterosexuals. Do you consider it safe to expose your children to heterosexual teachers? With all the societal support that marriage receives, the divorce rate are spiraling. Why are there so few stable relationships among heterosexual people? Why are heterosexual people so promiscuous? Would you want your children to be heterosexual, knowing the problems that they would face, like heartbreak, disease, divorce? Sounds weird, right? A little bit. Now imagine individuals who are not heterosexuals being asked those questions rather frequently. Just keep that in mind when you proceed in life. All right, now let's talk a little bit about gender development. So gender identity is one's personal private sense of maleness or femaleness. And one way to acquire gender identity is by gender role socialization. And that is the process of learning gender behaviors considered appropriate for one's sex in a given culture. So what are some examples of ways the society socializes us? Not what they socialize us to be, but how. Think about it for a moment. Hopefully you have some ideas. For example, toys. How many times there's this idea of buying cars or potentially Legos for males, for boys, but Barbie dolls for girls? Well, yes, that's potentially that, but then you might have the dads who still get their daughters a mini soccer table or mini pool table. I was one of those. Sports, for example. We don't usually send girls to play football. Colors. Pink is for girl, blue is for boy, right? Whenever, we go to a baby shower or something like that, the decorations can even symbolize and show, the gender of the baby. An interesting fact was that actually pink was associated with males and blue was associated with females up until one of the companies like Macy's or something like that back in the day decided to make a fashion statement or something like that and flip those. And since then, the colors have actually switched. Another example, media, parents' expectations, the way they play with their children. Parents usually play a little bit more rough, like maybe chase or catch games with their boys, but being like, oh, don't run too fast, you might fall. They might say something like that to their girls. The way they describe their children. Oh, I just had this wonderful baby girl, and she was just absolutely beautiful. Well, if how would you think somebody might describe their baby boy? Those are the differences and examples for gender role socialization. What are the traditional gender roles, you might think? Well, let's first cover what gender roles are. Those are the patterns of behaviors that are regarded as male or female by one's culture, sometimes also referred to as a sex role. Usually there are traditional gender roles. So, for example, women's place is in the kitchen. Men are in business. That would be considered a belief in a traditional gender role. And then there are stereotypes. And those are the oversimplified and widely held beliefs about basic characteristics of men and women. So men are usually viewed as more independent, that they can't potentially express their emotions, whereas women are actually, oh, they're overly emotional. I'm talking about stereotypes right now, of course. And gender roles influence how we act. So gender role stereotypes, they turn gender roles into false beliefs occasionally and frequently about what men and women can and cannot do. Those are very persistent and can be a major career and life obstacle. Potentially, if you think about it, one research looked at resumes. So they had literally the same identical resumes. The only difference was the name on the resume was of a male, and on the other one it was of a female. When it was for a position, a more stereotyped position for a man, they hired the men. When it was a position for a woman, such as a secretary, something like that, even though they had literally identical resumes, they chose the woman. Please check out the YouTube video clip that I posted showing a little bit what would happen if the stereotypical gender roles would have flipped. I hope you found this YouTube video as hilarious as I did. Alright, next we're going to talk about androgyny, and this is the presence of both masculine and feminine traits in a single person. And research found that these types of individuals are more adaptable. Think about it. If they possess traits that can be considered both masculine and feminine, they can better adapt to situations where require them to be a little bit more masculine, supposedly male situations, and also situations require them to use their feminine traits. So this is also part of the gender development. And gender variance, transsexuality, is a condition in which a person's biological sex does not match his or her preferred gender. Transsexuals are people who transition from one sex to another. Transgender individuals, unlike transsexuals, is a term for people whose identity, expression, behavior, or general sense of self does not conform to what is usually associated with the sex they are born with. Please check out the YouTube clip about a little boy who was born as Jack, but then early on realized that he was born in the wrong body, and how his parents accepted it and the process that he underwent. Also, in the media, we saw the story about Bruce Jenner transforming and becoming Caitlyn Jenner. And Jon Stewart talks very interestingly about it, this process in the Comedy Central skit. And please check that out as well. Alright, that's all I have for you for today.